hello everybody for I guess the third week now that I've participated in a live office hour, which I assume is what this is because it feels a little bit different because we have interpreters this time and we have more people joining and it's quite a bit more exciting, I think. Anyway, so happy to be here. Thanks very much, Aimee. I think it's really great that certification is now free. I think that was really important, considering the level of interest in the course and the participation we've had from everybody. I think it's really great that people can come away from the course with certification with the proof that they have gone through it, have gone through these materials, have considered the questions we brought up in the class. The biggest thing that stood out to me in this course was the sheer level of participation. Last week, the second discussion question for Module 3 was I had everybody compare the output of Bard Claude, which is now available in over 95 countries, and ChatGPT in writing headlines and article text, so copy. And a lot of you came back with really interesting in-depth reports on how they differ and whether Bard is better in this situation or ChatGPT is better in this situation. It felt really serious, and it was amazing to see the interest that people had in really contemplating which product would suit them best or their newsroom best. And so I think, yeah, the participation is really, it's just like, it was crazy to see the number of people writing in every week with questions and having to respond to them and feel like, because I don't want to leave anybody hanging, and I read everything that comes into the class, and I think Aimee does the same, and it's really jaw-dropping. And I think it makes sense considering generative AI is the thing for this year. It's in, of course, but it's in for a good reason. It's not like crypto. Crypto, I think from 2016 onwards was a little bit, there was a lot of hype behind it. There was a lot of interest, but eventually it dropped off. But we're looking at a technology now that is really unexpected. Coming from the research domain, the research world that I am, we don't have a clear sense of how these models work, but yet they do work and they do amazing things. And so it's important to meet them head on and consider what they're capable of. And so I congratulate everybody for coming this far in the course and for engaging with the questions as you have. And I'll hand it off to Mariana.
Thank you, Sil. Thank you, Aimee. Thank you for having me today, joining you guys in this live session. For me, it's been beyond inspirational, like seeing we have about almost 4,000 participants in the Spanish course. And like Sil said, it's really hard sometimes to keep up with all the comments, all the questions in the forums, but everybody's been participating so much. And I really enjoy the fact that I sense that people are embracing the technology, like everybody's curious about it. And comparing to what happened with the transition into the digital era 20 years ago, I was working for a newspaper 20 years ago and got to work on the new websites. It was everything new. Like there was a lot of concern on, are we gonna not have a job anymore? And people were really scared. And there was a lot of rejection to the digital era, to the digital transition. And now I'm happy that I sense that people are they passed that, and now they're like truly embracing the technology, and a little bit worried about what's going to happen. Are we going to lose our jobs? But I feel that the way the course was designed and the modules are very good at helping people to feel confident on, do not be afraid, just learn the technology, take advantage of the technology, and let's just take the best out of it. And I think that people are truly getting the message. I really like that we've been putting a lot of emphasis on the ethical aspects. And especially there's a lot of people within the education field, but a lot of people within the industry, within from a lot of media outlets, I would say from a lot of newspapers. So I sense that a lot of people especially from big media outlets, are very thankful that we are providing this useful information, and in a way that is being very easy to understand and follow. And I think it's been just wonderful. And I'm really excited that we got to work on this. Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, thank you for expanding it. I mean, if it was in English only, we would have left out a lot of people. So I'm glad that we were able to, that UT Austin made the Knight Center made it available in Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese too. So if you have questions about any, that's why Sil is here, that's why Mariana is here. If you have questions about any aspect of the course, module 1, 2, 3, or 4, please drop that in the chat. I'm so glad. It looks like A.L. Brignoni wants a little more next time. He or she said they'd like to see a follow-up course if there are new, maybe dire developments that we should be aware of. Ooh. So one of the things that I'm thinking about, especially for newsrooms, is how generative AI is going to impact search in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think the visibility for your website is something that needs to be top of mind, because many, many news outlets are going to be invisible, I think, in the new generative search. So I don't know, Sil or Mariana, if you can confirm or deny, or if you have your own hellscape that's coming.
I don't think personally, I think there's been a lot of my sense is that quite a number of companies are now going about the integration of AI at a much slower pace than they would have, or I think quite a number of pundits thought they would be at the beginning of this year. When GPT-4 came out, when LangChain became a thing, when you had things like Baby AGI taking over the trending topics on Twitter, people were really concerned that generative AI language models, diffusion models, would supersede humans rather rapidly. And I think what we're seeing now is a much more careful and much more nuanced take of what these technologies can provide in terms of benefits to the newsroom. And so I am, because of that, a little bit more positive about these technologies. I don't think they will necessarily produce a hellscape. I could see a situation in which journalism as a whole shifts significantly, um, in the sense that you've always had news writing, and then you've had journalism and investigative journalism and long form pieces and content writing. And I think those will remain the same. Boots always have to be on the ground with regard to gathering materials and putting together a story. And I don't think that will change because journalism is ultimately a human practice. We're reporting on humans and we are humans. And there's a nice sort of synchronicity there. There's a nice sort of synergy there where I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think these models have quite yet understood what it means to be human, so to speak. And their understanding of the world is just a little bit different, and hallucinations and other problems highlight that. So I think if anything, and especially reflecting on the materials and putting together this course, I'm positive about generative AI moving forward. And I think there's a road there to be using these technologies to improve the current state of journalism, which is not looking pretty in many countries, especially Canada. And because, I mean, for example, you can't share news right now still on Messenger or Twitter because they're squabbling with the federal government. We have issues that are not generative AI right now, and I think those are bigger issues and more probable to lead to a hellscape. I don't know if Mariana has any thoughts to add on.
No, I think that, like I said before, like I think that people are truly embracing the technology and not necessarily, at least from what I can see, from what I've been reading in the course and just people in general talking about this. Because basically, one of the things that we are raising awareness right now is that we've been already using AI for years, right? And we just didn't know that it was called AI. Like, the transcribing, the transcripts, like all these, like the search in different places, and even just like Aimee said in one of the videos, like 20 years ago we needed the recorder and the cassette and spend lots and lots of hours working on that. So basically, I think that we've been using AI for years now, but we just didn't know it was necessarily AI. And one of the things that I'm seeing right now is that we're just starting to understand the difference between just artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence. I think there's been some sort of a misunderstanding. So as we continue moving forward or understanding that, we're gonna take more advantage of the tools. I don't necessarily think that it's not going to take our jobs. If anything, I think that this is a great moment to do journalism, because we have all these amazing tools that can help us reduce the time that we used to put in, different tasks in the newsroom. And now we can truly focus on doing more investigative journalism, like focusing more on taking care of the human side of the stories. And like Sil said, like it's not necessarily replacing the human part of the job that as journalists we are supposed to do. So I think it's I worked for the Google News lab some years, and I remember telling my colleagues that I wish I had some of these tools 20 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And just
exactly.
imagine the wonderful things that we could done in the past, and we still managed to do. We did great pieces. So just imagine if we had those tools back at that time.
Yeah, yeah. I think about that a lot. Like when, as we get better and leaner and smaller, the computing. If you think about the computers that used to fit into a room, and now we're carrying it around in our pockets, it's pretty incredible. But Antonio asked, do you think at some point AI will make our audience prefer to use the chatbot rather than the website? I think, Antonio, we really need to watch closely people's interest and engagement with a chatbot. 200 million subscribers in 2 months can't be wrong. They might not be right either, but I do think it's informative that people want answers. They have questions and they want answers, and I think newsrooms have to get better at providing those answers quickly and efficiently, and that it will reshape how we present the news. I do think, I don't think the 800-word story is dying, but I do think it needs to be modular, and it needs to be able to be not just meta tagged, but maybe even individually paragraphs tagged, so that these things can be drawn up very, very quickly for an audience who does have an appetite to ask a question. I don't know, Sil or Mariana, if you have forecasting on that front.
I think,
Go ahead.
sorry, Mariana, please.
No, go ahead. I was looking at other questions that I want to address once you're done. Go for it.
Okay, this will be really quick. I think journalism transitioning into the digital age, into the age of Google, really rather significantly changed how some stories are written, and content, and how content is written across the internet more generally. SEO has been something of a plight. I mean, you can look at cooking recipes as a good example. They become really long. They never get to the point. They don't show you the recipe until the very end, and it's like three pages of just an essay explaining why they happen to be making oatmeal cookies on one Sunday afternoon when it was snowing or something like. But the reason they do that is because Google, the engineers at Google, people who don't necessarily think about the content that they are forwarding on to other people that they're having on the website, these are engineers who might not necessarily be people, and they don't quite understand why someone might be looking at a recipe. Maybe they get all their food through delivery or something, or takeout. They put a lot of weight on certain websites that have particular characteristics, and websites that optimize for SEO have a lot of text, they have a lot of links, they have quite a number of advertisements, and they include all sorts of junk that Google provides through their tags. And because of that, the way some content on the web has changed over the last 20 years. And really, as Aimee says, 200 million users in 2 months is phenomenal, because ChatGPT just gets to the point, and we accept the fact that it might be wrong, and Bing just gets to the point, and Bard just gets to the point. And so I think with news, we might be looking at, just as the transition into the age of Google changed things around, we might be questioning once again, how is it that written information should be dispensed to people? How is it that information should be recorded? When we see so clearly that people want the information first, peripheral second, or flourishes second. So like we'll see. But I think it's opening up these questions nonetheless. And so Marianne.
Thank you. I wanna read this question. Yo Yuma says, what are some key skills do you feel will be key for journalists to remain relevant in this generative AI era? I would say that just for us as journalists, we need to remain curious about what's going on and be empathetic to connect with our sources, with the stories that we're covering, because obviously we can do a lot of things with AI. There are many different tools, but the skill of being empathetic and connecting and being able to tell the story from the from the human part of the story, that's something that I don't think is going to be, not any chatbot or any chat GPT or any of these tools are going to replace that. And I remember exactly when in the transition for the digital era 20 years ago, we had not the same questions, but very similar questions. And the thing that I learned so far is that as journalists, our job is to keep informed and to keep getting trained and educated on the technology. I think that one of the main problems with the industry nowadays is that we didn't embrace the technology, we didn't get prepared, and then some of the skills or some of the tasks were like replaced by technology or tools. But we used to have people just dedicated to transcribe interviews, I mean, many years ago. Now we don't need to have anybody doing that because we have all the different tools. But one key element, I would say, that is staying informed, educated, learn different skills in journalism, and being able to go out in the field and do reporting, like go talk to people. Not only, I see a lot of sometimes students or journalists, they want to maybe like work always from the office or from home, but just go out and talk to people and do your interviews in person. And that's something that ChatGPT, any chatbot, is not going to be able to do for you. So I think our job remains very important.
Yeah, I think editors are going to be needed. A lot of editors are going to be needed
Right.
because I do think newsrooms will begin to rely on generative AI for outputs. So I think the editors, their discernment, their ability to really scrutinize what's happening in the text, like, is that true? Could it be true? I just think that that's going to be a key skill, and to as Lynn pointed out, to that AI can't be curious. I think stay curious in this space. I think that's the thing that has helped me with my career, to staying employed in journalism, is I'm always looking to see what's next. How can it, and to not push it away, but to really embrace it. That said, when you are working in a newsroom, that can sometimes be a lonely place because not everyone is where you are. You might be the heretic in your newsroom who's like, it's coming, and people are like, we have to worry about today's story. But I do think in the best of newsrooms, there's room for both types of personalities. We need both of those personalities.
Mm-hmm.
We need the ones who are going to do the day story, and we need the ones who are thinking about tomorrow. And so you just have to know that it's a different state of being. It's a different form of Zen that you have to have in order to make it. I think, Sil, you look like you might wanted to say something about that.
No, I think what you're saying is right on point, and I was looking at the questions that are coming in because many of them are really good, and I'm kind of worried that we might not be able to get to them all by the end of this session. It's editors in the loop is another way of saying we need humans in the loop, and I think that'll be true across all industries, really. I was just presenting at Media Party in Argentina 2 weeks ago, and we had the former head of curation at Twitter also do a keynote at the same session. And at this session, she was discussing the need for humans in the loop. When she was hired on at Twitter, they were doing manual interventions on every single piece of submitted content. So they had moderators manually go through every single thing that was posted to Twitter and removing pieces of content that were not great. And this was a complete time suck. It was too much work, too many people. They needed too many editors, in quotes, like not the same kind of editing job, but regardless, they needed a lot of people. And she made the switch to a semi-algorithmically enhanced workflow, and she called it human in the loop. And the idea is that at some point, you still need someone to be looking at it, because at the end of the day, humans will be reading the stories. And so while we're still trying to align language models to human preferences through technologies like reinforcement learning from human feedback, they're still not quite there. And so I completely agree that editing will continue to be an important job and will become more of an important job, especially as more and more content has not gone through human eyes in the creation process.
Yeah.
So you might see it as a kind of like uplifting of everybody is not an editor, maybe theoretically. Anyway.
I think so. So Michael Warren asks, since generative AI by design confabulates results, are we setting up journalists to fail in newsrooms with a zero tolerance for errors? That is such a good question, especially as I think about the news coming out of Gaza and Israel. I don't have any tolerance for errors in that situation. However, journalists and newsrooms inadvertently make errors because sometimes there's a pause in what is known on the ground. You hear an explosion and you don't know how many people were affected. And so sometimes even without AI in the mix, we only know what people are able to tell us on the ground. But I think that's really interesting, Michael. I don't know what Mariana and Sil think about that. Should we be less prissy about our exactitude? Isn't that the only thing we have?
Not
No,
at all.
I want to add something about that, and it actually this question relates a little bit about to the other question that we had before from Joy Juma on the key skill. And actually, like I'm going to give you a quick example with this course. As we had the videos, right, in English, we needed to have them in Spanish and in Portuguese. So obviously, YouTube, it gives you the tool to have the captions in the language that you picked. But even though we have a tool to do that, and we use it to translate, we still needed, like, in my case, me going through the translation, because we need to be super accurate. Does that make sense? So another key skill I would say for journalists is to learn another language, because you could have any amazing tool to transcribe or translate or whatever, but you still have to go through this and make sure that it's accurate, that we're not including any mistakes, because there's also the cultural differences in language that these tools are not going to get. So I don't think we need to we still have to remain, like very strict, not strict, but what was the word that you used, Aimee? Like very precise.
Exact.
Yeah, very exact on what we are producing. And for like these translators and the Google Translate, for example, the plugin works good. It works better than it was working 10 years ago, but you still have to go through the text and make sure that it's actually, and listening to the original language and making sure that it's being translated properly. Otherwise, people are going to receive a different message. So no, I think that, yeah, we need to remain being like accurate, exact, and just that's not going to go away. If anything, we're going to need to be more rigorous and strict on what we do, in my opinion.
So, are we being too prissy?
Not even a little bit. And I think there's a big disconnect between what research companies and companies producing generative AI technologies think about when they discuss in the world of classification and predictive machine learning. The golden number to always reach on any predictive task is around 90% accuracy. That's a big gap. That's 1 out of 10 times you're incorrect on some kind of predictive task. And if you accept that in a news situation, like you said, like coming out of Israel, if you have incorrect information 1 out of 10 times, that's really not great. So I think newsrooms should be demanding more, and I think they're in a position to demand more, considering what's coming down the pipeline in terms of aligning these models. And like, if we always have someone looking at the output, making sure that they're not producing false news, fake news all on their own. I think here's a question from Michael Warren. Since generative AI by design confabulates results and using it to generate news content necessarily creates errors, we just answered that one.
Yeah, yeah.
or a similar one. But no, we should not be lowering standards. And from Gerardo Ariola, is there any direct link in journalism between AI and SEO? What do you think? I think something that I've repeated a few times to people over the last couple of months is that language models, by design, write the mean. They are trained with the bulk of the internet in their pre-training step. So when you take a large language model fresh off the press and it's not been trained yet and it's ready to be trained, we feed it the bulk of the internet. We feed it trillions of words, terabytes of information. And because of that, because we are compressing all of that information into a very small space, these language models have to take terabytes of information. They study the patterns and the regularities of this information, and they compress it down to a few gigabytes, ultimately parameters. There's quite a bit of compression that happens and correspondingly loss. Like when you save a JPEG at 50% quality in Photoshop, you're getting all sorts of grain in the photo because the computer is just dispensing of that information. And because of that, uh, language models write the mean. They learn to write in a very average way. And if the bulk of content on the internet is written in an SEO manner, like I was describing before, there is a chance that copy written by AI products, if not properly trained, will end up sounding like that. So just like people have raised in the last 6 months, that there is an issue of a feedback loop where we give the language model content already written by a language model, and there's a chance for it to something really bad to happen there. If we're not careful, they could begin to sound a little SEO-ish, and we see that with ChatGPT. It's quite a bit like AP English. It sounds very much generic and very corporatized, and I think there are ways to mitigate that, but there is a link in the sense that AI content could begin to sound like SEO content, and correspondingly, if we all are using the same AI products, we could, for example, be looking at a situation where all news orgs or many news orgs start to also sound the same in their tone. So that's a link that I could be seeing, and I'm sure Aimee and Mariana have other thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the the part about search engines changing in the next 6 to 12 months, I think SEO as a skill is, you're going from using a dartboard to having to hit the bullseye every time if you want to be one of the 3 links underneath the summarization. So it's going to be like a mastercraft at this point. I know that SEO and meta tags can be helped and assisted with AI, but you're really going to have somebody sharpen their toolkit to make it even better. So aside from editors, which I think we'll need more of, I think we're going to need people who are really good at gaming SEO in a way that they haven't quite. I mean, they're already pretty good at it, but I mean, they're going to have to be even better. So I think that is the link that I see that that newsrooms need to prepare for.
Right. There's a question from Mel. It says, I would like to know your views on AI summarizing and generating news from existing news outlets for free without paying them. It threatens existing news outlets because people will only read the summary without visiting the original media. What would be your view on this?
Well, I work for an organization that has worked with OpenAI for a content license to license our material for training, and I hope that sets a precedent in the news community in terms of our work and our material being absorbed by the large language models and then not paid for. So that content is not free, it's not easy, and it's often not safe to produce. And I think as I did speak about model collapse in one of the modules, as that begins to take hold, as more AI is trained on AI, I think our material that we create every single day is going to be more lucrative as we go forward. So AP produces 2,000 stories a day, 3,000 photos a day. We are producing a lot, and I think it could be wildly informative to the LLMs, but it's not, as I said, free to produce.
I'm personally, I've never seen a website, so I took the question a slightly different way. Are there websites that re-up other websites' content, but in a summarized form. And I'm not sure if I've personally ever seen that. Way back in the day, you had pop URLs or like Dig. They just took headlines from different websites and put them all on the same page. But I could imagine a situation in which ChatGPT would rewrite an article and summarize it in very, very short, compact manner and throw it up on the same page. I've not personally seen that. Um, but if the implicit question is, can we prevent that? Then I don't think, unfortunately, I'm not sure whether we can precisely. But the bigger question is settling the issue of IP, as Aimee says, and I think the AP is doing an excellent job in that regard.
Be determined, right? Like it seems genius now. We'll see. We'll see in 5 years.
That's true. That's true.
T. Lang asked, "Can AI create editorials?" And I put a link to one as an example. If you are an editor at any publication, stop doing this. Do not stop having it write essays and editorials. That is not what it's good for. As Sil said, they can sound like as if it's written for SEO specifically or for a 7th grade civics class. Stop doing it. It's not cute. It's not funny. It's not trendy. I had somebody come up after I gave an in-person presentation, said, you know, what would be really great is if you would have said this introduction, you know, you would have given an introduction and then said, this was written by ChatGPT. And I'm like, no, that's dumb. Stop using it for those purposes. We all get it. We all know that it's wooden and that it doesn't have life in it. There was an article about like, you know, a rabbi used it to create a sermon and it has no soul. Well, that's because it's not a human. So don't use these tools for how they are not meant to be used. It is not cute or trendy to do so. It will really make me put you on Twitter and shame you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I wanna add to that, Aimee. I remember like through the whole course we are reminding our participants that we need to remain aware of what's the right use for these tools, and we keep telling people that it's good to use these tools to save time and effort, especially with small newsrooms, but we would never recommend to use this to create content without human supervision. Like we keep saying that over and over. And so in that matter, I think that it's very important for us as journalists, not only to use the tools, but we need to do a better job on informing what's on AI, what's actually what is that used for, like the example that we included in the last module, right? Like because we need more information on that. There's a lot of misconceptions around AI and the use of AI in the newsrooms. So I think that we need to work more on that as journalists, and not only going with, okay, so we can create editorials or we can create summarized content. Like, no, that's not necessarily the use for it, but that's why we need to keep informing on what's going on with AI. Make it like a regular beat within the media outlets, you know, like it used to be technology, now it should be technology, AI. It should be like, I like what's going on with some big media outlets that are incorporating the position within the newsroom, because it's very important to consider as a new bit, you know, to cover.
so Raj says, as a journalist, it's constant conflict between what is fact and what is fake and what is plagiaristic. At what point does the newsroom draw the line? And how do journalists decide that threshold? Is it time driven or event driven? Good questions. I think we've all been wrestling with these questions since we kind of learned the depth of the scraping that the technology companies have committed over the last probably 4 years, maybe 5 years. Sil has a better timeline on that, but I think the awareness became acute in the last year, especially as journalists and even book authors. I think The Atlantic has a feature where you enter your name or a person who you're looking for to see if it used the content of your archive, and many authors are dismayed that their work has been used without being asked. So at what point is it fake or I think in terms of the escalation of mis and disinformation, there's new research that has come out by Felix Simon this week, and I can post that in the chat, that actually says it's not going to necessarily escalate mis and disinformation, and I do think that is what kind of where I've been coming down. Although I've read equal parts of articles that say it's going to amplify everything, and then it's going to mean nothing. So I think I do think that the distribution streams are still a point of friction for massive assault of mis and disinformation content items. And I'll look for that link while maybe Sil and Mariana weigh in on that.
So I think to your point, Raj, at what point does the newsroom draw the line? I think newsrooms have a duty to draw the line, and I don't think that line has necessarily been drawn thus far by newsrooms. So misinformation, disinformation has been a big deal ever since 2016. Twitter went on full alert as soon as Trump was voted in. I think you had Cambridge Analytica doing quite a bit of disinformation work in the UK during the time of Brexit, but it was a major part of the conversation in the mid to late 2010s. And OpenAI, when they were releasing GPT-2 in late 2018, they delayed the release of the full large model by 6 months because if anybody remembers, GPT-2 was the ancestral model to ChatGPT. It was the first large language model that was deployed to the public that had clearly superhuman abilities. It was more than just a chatbot. It was more than just cleverbot. It looked and it sounded like it could write that, and it could write in a way that belied an understanding of the world. And GPT-2 blew my socks off. It got quite a number of people interested in large language models, but it didn't come out all at once. GPT-2 and GPT-3 are actually like a series of models. They're classes of models. So GPT-2 came in a very tiny version, medium version, a large version, and the extra large version. And the extra large version is what we call GPT-2 nowadays. It's the full size model, but they didn't release it all at once. They released the tiny one, and then a few months later, they released the next size version, and then the next size version up, and the next size version up, about 6 months to a year after that. And during this period, OpenAI said they were conducting tests on whether the release of GPT-2 in the successively large versions were causing an uptick in disinformation. And they concluded that no, apparently there was not more disinformation being produced because there was suddenly a model that could produce it just like that. You can go to GPT-2 and type in a fake headline and it'll write you a fake article just like that. And ChatGPT is the same way. I have no doubt that disinformation will be increasing, especially as time goes on. But the conversation has not exactly been in the hands of newsrooms thus far, I think is my point. That OpenAI took on the onus themselves to determine if their models were causing more disinformation, and whether we can trust the results of their study is, I think, a bit of a difficult question, because they're not the ones who would be at risk if there was disinformation purportedly written by some major news organization being thrown around the internet. They're not incentivized to really criticize their own product that they're releasing, is I think a part of the issue. So newsrooms have not thus far been the ones to draw the line, but I think they should be moving forward. And Mariana, if you have anything to contribute, I can go to the next question. Or...
Thank you. I just want to say something real quick. It's like, I think, misinformation, disinformation have existed since I remember. It's just moving faster because it's information and goes faster. Like the speed is like faster than ever with all the technological advances. But that's why we need to keep like learning to do fact checking. That fact checking, it's another skill. And I go back to the question earlier, like a key skill for journalists is to learn to do fact checking. We need to be able to do that. And in that matter, there's a lot of people are scared about AI being one of the main things increasing misinformation and disinformation. But on the other hand, AI can also help us to do fact checking, in a better way, faster and more accurate. So I like to always see kind of the bright side and just, again, like do not think of the AI tools as the enemies of the newsroom, as the enemies of our jobs, but just look at it from the other side. And it's like, we have misinformation. We do have a lot of things that we need to be checking on all the time as journalists. So just use the tools, and that's part of our jobs. That's not going to go away. And it's not necessarily, I don't think it's the AI is not the thing to blame for, necessarily the increase of the misinformation, disinformation around the world.
Oh, I thought maybe Sil, you wanted to. So Antonio says the platforms like Midjourney and Blue Willow started out free and now have a cost, but we see that Bing Chat offers DALL-E 3 for free. Many believe that paying for these tools gives us the right to use the generated images for advertising or monetization activities. What are the limits of publication in the media and at the advertising level? This is all going to be determined. I mean, it's TBD. And I think that's why a lot of companies and news organizations have demurred from using these tools for anything that is related to a money-making opportunity, because you just don't know if OpenAI were to lose, or I'm sorry, if Stability AI were to lose their lawsuit, then everything that uses Stable Diffusion could maybe also then be incorporated into that. So I think it's to be determined. And I think this is true, like right now, when we did our 5 projects that we released open source last week, one of them, well, 3 of them use GPT 3.5, which is great, except for it's the prices are low. And for Whisper, if we were going to use GPT-4 for Whisper, it was going to increase the cost by like 15 times. So, but that is a useful trick of technology companies and other companies too, suppress the prices, drive out competition, and then increase the prices or change the model. So I think I've talked to a university professor who is concerned that they might not allow the public to use these tools at all anymore, that it might be it will be decommissioned and then included into applications that other people will pay for. So just to say that the rules will change as this space develops, and as these the big 6 technology companies who are working on large language models, as soon as they find a business model around this, they're going to go and use it. And so right now, the only people I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sil and Mariana, that are making money are the chip manufacturers and the cloud servers. So those people are doing fine, but that's really so far the only money making opportunity we've seen. But we can all tell that it's coming.
Everybody is undercutting everybody else at cost right now. If you want to host a single model on your own, you can run it on your computer, your MacBook Pro or your MacBook Air or your iPhone or your Windows PC or an Intel chip or AMD chip. These are all capable of running individual models, but the really big models that are very useful, especially in production for large companies, cost a lot of money to run. And OpenAI right now is undercutting the competition at cost. And because it's venture backed, they get a lot of money. It's just like Uber, right? They get a lot of money from different investors, and they burn the money at a remarkable rate because they know they can beat out the competition in the long run, or at least they hope they can. And so they're just losing money ad infinitum. I think I read somewhere ChatGPT was costing something like $1 million a day in server costs to serve the people at its height. But going back to your question, Antonio, what are the limits of publication in the media at the advertising level of publishing AI generated content? In the US context, I think that the biggest signal we have right now is someone tried to claim copyright over a graphic novel where the images were generated with Midjourney and the story was generated by ChatGPT. And I think a judge at some state determined they couldn't, and that it was not their content to be copyrighted. And because it was generated by an algorithm, it was technically public domain. So I hope it's not like that for all content, but really, as Aimee says, it's to be determined. So So maybe on to the next question from David Aponte. Is there any risk of penalties from Google or the big platforms for content made with ChatGPT, perhaps by detecting some kind of spam, taking into account that the production of content can rise exponentially? I don't know,
I don't
actually.
think so.
Yeah, I
We
don't
would
think
have
so at
to
this
ask
point.
Google actually. But no, I don't think so. I mean, it would be really, I guess, difficult to detect, but also like how about the other content that is not necessarily produced by ChatGPT? Like, I don't know. I don't think that would be, I don't see it happening. But like I said, we would have to ask Google or the other platforms.
So that is actually, I think, CNET was the first to be discovered for using generative AI. What they did is they wanted to update some of their stories because they thought that by updating the stories, it would be preferred by search engines like Google. Or reprioritized, and that is how they got caught. Is that the updates and modifications had some glaring banking / numbers errors in them, and so that I think that's a kind of a inverse of what you're asking in terms of how people might use ChatGPT or other chatbots to kind of game SEO or game the search engines, but that the CNET is a huge example. And again, anytime you see these examples, the Gannett situation with the sports about 3 weeks ago, it's because there's a human not in the loop. So just keep that in mind, that tomorrow's headlines about where AI got it wrong is often because a human was not there when they needed to be. So I think no one here on the call thinks that you should just set it on autopilot and publish. I think we're here to say that AI works best when having its hand held by a human. Metaphorical hand. Lynn asks, Lynn, you've been very active in the chat. I've noticed that, and I appreciate your engagement. You said that there's also the issue of citizen journalists. What are your thoughts? I mean, I've worked, before I was doing AI, I was working with user-generated content and teaching journalists how to verify things online. Often UGC is done by, I don't know if they're called citizen journalists, but certainly citizens or people who are sending it in and aren't traditionally trained journalists. And journalists used to not be traditionally trained. I mean, most of them didn't finish high school and like kind of lived a nomadic existence and prided themselves on seeing eye to eye with the common man. So these advanced degrees in journalism, while great because journalists are no longer getting trained in newsrooms, that's not how it has been traditionally. So I think citizen journalists may actually take us back to our roots with very skilled editors to discern if the motivations of the photo taker. I'm just using photos as an example, and to help the process to publication. Sil or Mariana?
I think it all comes back down to this question of verification. Again, I don't, my wheelhouse are the language models. Anybody can use them. They're very simple to use. There's some issues at the UX level with installing certain language models, with gaining access to them, to figuring how to use the API. At the bare minimum these days, it is required to know a little bit of Python, but I expect that to be reduced as time goes on. And so if there is a situation in which GPT is found to be excellent for doing research and people want to start doing their own journalism as a citizen journalist and submitting that content somewhere, I could see a situation in which generative AI technologies are a boon and can help boost content in that regard. But I can also see a situation in which they lead people down the wrong path. And a good example would be, I think in Florida, maybe even a couple of months ago, there was a lawsuit happening, and the lawyer for the person pursuing the lawsuit wanted to find prior precedents on similar cases. And so they asked ChatGPT, are there similar cases that looks like this one? And ChatGPT went, of course, and gave a number of court citation numbers and the titles of the court cases. And, here's the evidence behind me saying yes. And so the lawyer took that back to the judge. The judge took a look at it and went, what is this? None of these court cases exist. Your precedence is all made up. What is this? And the lawyer eventually admitted to having used ChatGPT. So as long as this issue of verification is settled, and it is not, but as we get closer to settling it into the future and we have some sort of answer about how to best verify the content generated by generative AI, I think you can imagine a situation in which some people can take certain tasks into their own hands.
Yeah, and
And
again, that's that was a human error. I mean, I realized ChatGPT gave this person some previous court cases, but as a lawyer, I would look those up and make sure that those were the cases that I wanted to do. And so again, it made headlines. AI made headlines because of a human doing really something stupid with it. So don't do that.
Yeah, it's due diligence at the end of the day, right? It's yeah.
Well,
So
oh, sorry. I was just going to say thank you, everyone, for these past 4 weeks. We're not done yet. I'm going to be jumping back into the forums. We'll have an email that comes tomorrow to sort of wrap up this week. Again, the materials will stay on for another 4 weeks, and the certificates are free. So maybe you hadn't thought about getting a certificate, and maybe now you do want to get one. But I mean, really, Sil, thank you so much for being a co-pilot with me on this. And Mariana for bringing this to a wider audience through your extra special skills of being able to translate and bring meaning to this, and developing new words in Spanish as the new words in English.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a wonderful experience. Thank you very much.
everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.